Welcome to the Woo and Science Podcast, episode 14. And today we have a special guest coming on to talk about how beauty is more than skin deep. More when we get back.
Hey guys, welcome back. Dr. Michael Longyear here and my lovely wife, Dr. Meaghan Longyear, both chiropractors in Jacksonville, Florida. Today we have a special guest coming on who's very near and dear to our heart. She's the one that brought us to Florida, her and her husband, Dr. Kevin. So we'll bring Dr. Cathy on. I don't know how to intro Dr. Cathy. She is... she's magical. She's just magical, right? She does a lot of different things, from cutting edge in acupuncture and kind of leading the way through that to own skincare line. She teaches with NET and neuroemotional technique, and she teaches she just does everything, right? And she does it all in an amazing way. So I'm excited to have her on. And I know we've talked about this topic in the past, and I love this idea of, and Cathy, I know you and I have gone back and forth on this, especially from the neurological perspective, on if beauty is more than skin deep, and really how it is and how it all ties in, right? And, if we go, I think the easy one to pick on here is kind of Botox and how that affects us, and how it's being used for so many things right now too. It's gaining in popularity. People have used it for beauty traditionally, but now it's also being used it's been for a long time for headaches and things. And they're even starting to use it for depression and mental health. Mm-hmm. And that should tell you something, right, about what it's actually doing to the brain and to the nervous system. If they've gone all the way from just, smoothing your wrinkles to now they're using it for mental health, and how all of that ties in, right? If I want to be nerdy for a second, one of the really big things about when your cognitive decline starts is there's something we measure, and it's called mask-like facies, or if I want to be more specific, it's hypomemia. And there's actually grades to hypomemia. The flatter your expression, the less your brain is functional, or less neuroresilience you have, essentially. To the point of, like, this is how we grade it. Like, if you just have a flat expression, that's a grade 1 hypomemia. If you have a flat expression and you don't smile or react to the environment, that's grade 2. If your mouth is slightly open, that's grade 3. And if it's all the way open and you're kind of like almost drooling out of one side of the mouth, that's a grade 4 hypomemia. And think about that. Like, some people go get that on purpose. And so not only does the brain feed that, but what we know is the brain is a feedback loop, right? If your brain is breaking down, it does that. But if you constantly do that, it's telling your brain to do that, which tells your brain to break down. So, there's a lot of really nerdy things. And I'll let Cathy, because this is where Cathy's story and how she ended up going from, doctor of acupuncture, working with patients, into a skincare line and using that kind of, because it's, and you were saying, Doc, it's a little bit of an interesting segue. But yeah, I'll kind of let you take over from there and go into that.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I was really excited to join the conversation. I anticipate something very exciting, something insightful from both of y'all, because I love the combination of the woo and the brain. I think you can't have one without the other, and they do belong together. So it's a beautiful marriage.
Listen to Cathy.
So
I'm coming around.
You're already there. Sorry, Dr. Mike, you are already there. So actually, I had two major turning points in my life as far as like direction in life. And, sledgehammers, as I say, they were not feathers, to redirect to the direction I was going in my life. The first one was at 26, when I was finishing some pre-med prerequisites, and I was thinking of doing allopathic medicine, and got really, really sick with Crohn's disease, ended up in the hospital for 3 months, multiple surgeries, almost died a couple of times. And there was a message there. And the message is Western medicine may have saved my life in that moment of emergency surgery, but it was doing nothing for me for healing and health. So I moved into acupuncture and had an experience that I never anticipated, but was absolutely thrilled recovery process, what I learned, that I couldn't help but to, it was a calling, right? So I went into the acupuncture field. And then within that, the neuroemotional technique and all of the different energy components that I feel like are so beneficial, because Chinese medicine is energy healing, right? And we talk about energy medicine being something of the future, where Spock scans the body and we, learn all these things. And then we do these like really new age kind of energy treatments. Well, we are in the future. We do scan the body. We do all that energy stuff. So we're there. But then when I was about 26, my second event that changed my direction from treating people who were really sick, autoimmune disorders, infectious issues, all of the things that digestive, because of course, you draw what you learn, right? Uh,
Mhm.
and I was traveling to California at a friend of mine's clinic, and I was 49, and I went to stand up to meet him as he was coming down the hall, and I happened to catch my reflection in a mirror as I was getting up, and I went, "Oh my God, when did that happen?" And so women do that all the time. They look in the mirror in the morning and they go, "What am I looking at?" So there was this whole disconnect, because I'm a practice what I preach kind of gal, right? And I was eating right, I was exercising, I was getting treatments, but there was this huge disconnect in how I looked and how I felt. And I mean, I'm 65 now, and I was 49 then, and I felt like I was what I would have said at 49, looked like I was 65. But I'm telling you, the changes when I kind of really realized how to really shift my practice into more of a detox on not just physical toxins, but emotional toxins as well. And then, of course, what I found through my whole process, like thinking about doing Botox, crazy for me, because that would have been a huge leap. No judgment for those who use it, because I get it. The industry is really hardcore on saying that women need to keep up with 30-year-olds or 20-year-olds, and that is the solution. So I get that. But for me, I couldn't digest it. I was just had too many concerns. So I started using like different skincare lines and different tools and things like that. And I couldn't stick with anything because I just wasn't getting the results. So I ended up, which was the third of the three things that I kind of changed in my practice, which was developing a natural facelift system. So, which was very well needed. And then really addressing that whole combination. So that's how that started.
Yeah, that's a cool story. I love the idea of that. But you brought that word back. I can't get away from emotions on this podcast. Everybody
Right.
wants to bring them, even if it's not her. Like she's always bringing it up. But yeah, so the idea of that, right? Your face is how we show emotions, and
Mhm.
Right.
depending on what research article you read, 90% or 70% of your communication is actually nonverbal. So things
Right.
like language, micro expressions, facial expressions, those really play a big part into what you're feeling. I know I can tell when this one's mad at me. She doesn't even have to say anything. I just like that look right there is kind of close to it actually, and her eyes are yellow. It's kind of crazy.
It's
We
a
get a
whole
big
thing.
Yeah.
thing, but our face can say 1,000 words.
Yep.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But the interesting thing that people don't consider is that you know when we're like you're reading Dr. Meg, right? When we're reading somebody or talking to somebody who's giving us like a heartfelt story, something that's a real stressor for them, we that micro mirroring of their expression is not where we are pulling empathy and showing empathy. What happens, and you know this, Dr. Mike, is that the muscles of the face send the message from the prefrontal cortex to that mammalian brain to digest what you're seeing and to interpret, oh, this person is feeling really sad and upset and frustrated. And we micro mirror to give our brain the message as opposed to the other way around. Once we have that message from our emotional intelligence, we bring it forward, and now we can use the words of empathy. But all of that, everything that happens before that is how humans connect, is through those facial expressions, through that empathy, through that subconscious reading of those emotions. And so we've always thought of it the other way around, where you're using facial expressions to be empathetic. But if you think about that process, it's really crazy, because what is it? 1 out of 3 people feel lonely, but yet when we can't actually connect with someone because we don't have facial expressions, you can't read me, I can't read you, you're going to disconnect from me. And I'm going to disconnect from you because I don't get you. Right. So we have this whole disconnect that happens right there. And then, of course, down the rabbit hole, every time we decrease the information we get from our prefrontal cortex to that mammalian brain, that emotional brain, we are decreasing our emotional intelligence.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And when we have that disconnection, our barriers go up, our walls go up, and we lose that social integration, right? Because
Right.
otherwise, if you're just looking at a flat kind of pane, there's not a lot of emotion there. There's not a lot of understanding. Your brain just doesn't know. I know I've sat with people that I can't read them because they
Right.
do have that flat, and it kind of freaks me out a little bit. And I know
Mm-hmm.
I put up a
Oh,
barrier and
yeah.
kind of block them, and it's just kind of going in another direction from people.
Well, making that point, I want to tell you about one of the research papers that I read addressing exactly that. There was a functional MRI on teens looking at videos of people who had, Botox and fillers, and they were measuring brain function, right? So in the mammalian brain, and what they found as these teens were being recorded through that functional MRI is that their brain fired up as if they were under trauma, right?
Wow.
We that's an interpretation itself. Our interpretation of that, my interpretation of that is that they don't know what they're seeing. So it's stressful for them because teens' nervous system and emotions develop so much slower. I mean, what is it, 21, that we don't fully develop our neural pathways for, especially for recognizing emotional and facial expressions. So they're you're talking about disconnecting, but what's happening to your brain as you disconnect? And when you take it back to a teen, they're so confused and they're so traumatized by not being able to understand the emotions that those people are unable to express.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
21 for females, 25 for males. As with everything, we're a little
Little
behind the
delayed.
curve, guys.
It'll
Sorry.
happen that way.
We saw that definitely, and I know, I'm sure, Cathy, you see this as well with patients, the little ones with the masks when COVID was going on,
Right,
how traumatizing that was for the kids not being able to understand what they were reading, because
right.
it's so important for us to be able to understand and connect with somebody based on those facial expressions, smiles,
Right.
frowns, all of that, and not being able to have that. And definitely 5 years out now, seeing a lot of that with these kids coming
Yeah.
in and that anxiety and stuff. Obviously,
Yes.
trapped in that mammalian limbic brain, and not knowing, and it's not their fault. They don't understand. They didn't develop, properly in that way.
Yeah.
All those
Yeah.
neural connections, but
All those neural
all those
connections.
neuro things.
Right, right, right. But you make a good point, Dr. Mag. You make a good point in even moms who are, maybe they're in their 40s and they have younger kids and they're trying to, keep up with the 20-year-olds and they're feeling the pressure of our current beauty industry message and
Yes.
they're doing the Botox. They also, through limbic resonance, aren't teaching their children those emotional expressions and how to read them as well if their kids can't really connect with them and understand whether they're, mom's upset, not by her yelling, because that's later, that comes later. It's the facial expressions and what builds up to it that the learning comes in. That's why emotional intelligence isn't it's not analytical intelligence, right? It's emotional intelligence, and emotional intelligence has to do with what we perceive without even realizing we're perceiving it through that neural connection.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And like babies' brains are all what they call spiral neurons or mirror
Mm.
neurons. And
Oh,
think of it like this to make sense of that facial expressions and how much babies are perceiving it. You stand the same way as one of your family members. Your gait
oh yeah,
same as one of your family members, the one that you
oh
see
yeah,
the most, that you identify with the most, right? Dr.
yes.
Meg stands just like her dad. Like we have pictures, and she's like, "That's where I got that stance that I do." And the facial expressions, some of them are just like grandparents or parents because your brain, when you're young, especially for babies, it's all mirror neurons. Everything they learn to do, they learn from watching you.
Mm-hmm.
And so that comes from everything from your emotional intelligence to how often you're up and moving and walking. You know, you got the last podcast did with Dr. Dan was about movement. If you don't move, your kid looks at that and says, well, I don't move either, right? It's
Yep.
Right.
learn everything through example and through mimicry and through those spiral neurons. And we have those neurons forever in our life, but they're at a much greater concentration before age 7 and then even before age like 15, 16 as well. So most of what you learn, especially early on, if you've had Botox and you're raising your kids in their teens or earlier years, they're not picking that up. And so then they're going to have that flat affect. And that flat affect, like we've talked about, is that it's that cycle, right? If you have flat affect, it turns the brain off. If your brain's turned off, you have flat affect. It kind
Right.
of goes in both directions and you
Right.
decrease your connection to others. And then again, to
And
your
then
point.
also that's depression, anxiety, right? Those are the symptoms that show up with a lack of affect is depression.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I
Well, and I
think
feel like a lot of people like kind of going on the whole like keeping up with, like all the TikTok stuff, right? Like everybody's trying to keep up, and especially, those of us that are in our like 40s and 50s that are looking at the younger generation stuff. Like, and I know you see this too, like all these insecurities that we have that, are coming out because they're just in your face, on social media. They're just everywhere. So we got to keep up. And so we're doing all these things to try to, get rid of the aging that naturally happens to us. And yes,
Yeah.
we don't like it, but we're turning to things that are
Right.
increasing that anxiety that we have. Like we clearly don't have. I mean, anxiety. I know you talked about the suicide rates and all of that stuff that jumps. So our mental health is just crap these days. But like the anxiety and the depression, and so now when you're seeing these people on your screen constantly, that's just driving that
Yeah.
pathway. So now we're just like, I've got to find something to fix it. I've got to find something to fix me instead of
Right.
looking for more. It might take a little bit longer to be able to reduce some of these, aging things that naturally happen, but that driving force of my low self-esteem, not feeling good enough, feeling all these
Yeah.
things to play into what you guys were saying with the kids, now the
Right.
kids are seeing that. So now we're just keeping that cycle going, but it's hard to
Yeah.
break, I mean,
It is
most of
hard to Yeah, it is hard to break. And, really, there's a whole nother topic on unpacking the emotional expressions we do have on our face and what they really mean, because that's also, it's a real misunderstanding in why we have the lines and the lack of the jawline or the lines from the mouth to the chin, from the nose, between the eyes, the wrinkles in the forehead. A lot of people think that's just, natural aging. That actually is not true. When we smile, we have lines, but when we stop smiling, those lines go away. So really, they're the lines of emotions that get stuck on our face based on our experiences.
Mhm.
So, it's like disappointments in life, I like to talk about around the mouth, and the, stressors in disconnecting with people and those expressions around the eyes. And I'm, Meg, you and I, or Dr. Meg, you and I are very expressive in our hands, expressive in our face. But that doesn't, but those are expressions that are happy expressions that open and move, and they're more about excitement. But the emotions that get stuck in our face, which is exactly where NET comes in, the
Mhm.
emotions that get stuck in our face have to do with our stressors and traumas and everything that we've experienced in our life that gets stuck, because the muscles of the face are very different than the muscles of the body. Muscles of the body, we have opposing, shortening and lengthening, right? Contract and extend, right? But the muscles of the face are more muscle to muscle, bone to muscle, right? Or bone to skin, right?
Yep.
So perpetual emotional expressions is what causes the lines to show up and draw, like that, losing that jawline. So when we can actually address that, we're also releasing emotional traumas as well.
Mhm. I like that. It makes me remember my grandmother always used to say, yes, we are definitely, Dr. Kathy, very expressionate people. And as a child,
Cartoon characters.
that's what he calls me. And my grandmother used to say to me, because I have some pictures where I'm just really mad,
Yeah,
and you see it, she says, if you keep doing that, your face is going to stick like that. And
she
I
was
remember
right.
being afraid, and oh my God, grandma was so right. Like, yes, my emotions are hanging out right there in my wrinkles.
Right, you're right, 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 exactly, right. Yeah, and the other is that people don't realize that it's really, we're talking about the even just the concept that you're we're not talking superficial. We're not talking skin deep. We're going below that. We're
Right.
going into the, muscles and the underlying tissues, fascia, lymphatic system, the muscles. Those are the areas that actually are what drags our face around, the skin around and drags that. So, addressing skin from our facial expressions or our lines or what we don't like about our face from a superficial level of things that are topical are not going to work because they don't address the underlying issue.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the key there when we're talking about releasing that as well.
Yeah, and when we have that, right, and we have that lack of facial to bring it into the lymphatics, and even tie this back in like to the Botox and things like brain fog, the lymphatics for your face work with the what's called the glymphatic system,
Right.
which is how your brain actually cleans house. And so when the facial expressions are flat, there's not as much lymphatic flow because you're not moving the muscles, because you move lymph, you move waste products by muscle movement, and that happens in the face the same as it happens in your body, and it
Right.
happens in your body and your face the same that happens in your brain, but specifically above the neck there's
Yeah.
this lymphatic system and the lymphatic system of the face that all drain through the jugulars here that are responsible for cleaning house in those areas. So if you're not moving the face and the face becomes hypomemic and there's less expression, then there's less clearance of toxins out of the brain. And we know now with research that when the lymphatic system and the lymphatic system don't work above the neck, you end up with more things like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's.
Right.
End up with more things like brain fog, which again, going back to the Botox, they've shown two ways that this happens. One is through flat affect, you have more brain fog, but two is the use of Botox. It breaks down acetylcholine, which is how it breaks the muscle spasms. But acetylcholine is a neurotransmitter in your brain that's responsible for excitation. When you don't have as much acetylcholine in the brain and you're breaking that down through Botox, you actually don't have the ability to create neural pathways. You don't have the ability to get excited.
Yeah.
So from neurological level, you literally don't have the ability to get it up. And then your face doesn't have the ability to stay up and show facial expression and tie you into the world and connection in that way too. So,
Yeah.
you know, a really nerdy side of it kind of plays into that. So
Yeah,
having,
actually, to just go on that as well, which I think is something that is really significant, is that the reason why we don't use chemicals on our body is because they're not just where you put them; they absorbed into your entire system. So if we think Botox or that decrease in those neurotransmitters that are being affected by where you inject, it's not going to stay right there because that's not how chemicals in our body work. They are infiltrated throughout the entire system almost immediately.
Mhm.
yeah. And, the skin is your largest organ. So it's literally bigger than the liver or any of those other things. And we don't think of it that way, but that's
Right.
how you absorb most of what you do. So it's important to, that's why I love the idea of a natural facelift, because it gets you away from Botox. And I want to, if we can branch into a topic that we went before, because you got to have a natural alternative, right? And this is where
Yeah.
I love where the woo and the science mesh is. One of the first things that I heard was, Dr. Meg and other people and Dr. Cathy talking about how it's about vibration, right? The higher frequency you're at, the better frequency you have, the higher your vibration. And I thought about that for a second and I'm like, the brain is the same. Like if I'm in lower brain, like limbic brain or
Mhm.
brainstem, I'm functioning really low and really poorly. But if I get into what we refer to as higher centers in neuroscience, I'm vibing high, to use their words, or I'm in that higher chakra. I'm out of my whatever. Um, and so I'm working better through that. And that's what I loved learning about your stuff. So for those of you guys who don't know, True Energy is Dr. Cathy's brand with the facial stuff. And if I can talk about this, I'm not asking you to share the secret proprietary information, but she's got frequencies that are actually embedded into her skincare line, which allow your brain to vibe high, your body to vibe high, and your skin to vibe high, right?
That's
So
right. Yeah. So really, it was utilizing all of that energy medicine that I had, been into for treating people for health, right? So, with acupuncture, we do an acupuncture treatment. And after the acupuncture treatment, we take them to the integration room. And the reason why is because we can do the treatment and get an amazing effect, but then you walk out into the world of stress and you can lose those treatments a lot faster than if you are using energy integration, frequency integration. So we integrated that energy, that frequency into the nervous system, either with or after a treatment, which is what y'all do, so that they can sustain that parasympathetic healing mode for as long as possible until that body starts learning how to keep it on its own, right? So that's the repetitive treatment part, right? So with True Energy, with the True Energy skincare, what I did is I have a little green bead in every product. And of course I have, my tools, the facelift tool and the body sculpting tool. And those are imprinted with the frequencies. And the design here is that you're right. There are thousands of frequencies in it that have to do with, balancing the acupuncture meridians, increasing collagen production. I did a third party, study with the True Energy because I wanted to make sure that if I put it in people's hands, it worked. I wasn't going to, I'm not going to, I wanted it out there, not just in my little, space. So, but this is the thing is that the concept of the frequencies is like retuning a piano or a tuning fork, right? I'm sure y'all use that analogy a lot. And the idea is that there's a perfect vibrational frequency of the cells. And that vibration is to the point where it does what it needs to do, not only to thrive, but to detox and to feed and to develop the energy or the mitochondria of that a cell as well. So that has a specific vibration. So what happens as we age, as we get sick, as we have traumas, as we have stressors, is we get a little out of tune, right? So, right, yeah. So, and sometimes we need a little help retuning. So this is about retuning the cells to behave like 25-year-old cells. So by exposing the frequency of a perfectly balanced cell, by using that little green bead in each of the products, by using the face tool, you're getting the exposure of a perfect vibrational frequency that your body can now learn from. And that actually, I'm sure, Dr. Mike, you can speak to, which is why we pick up those frequencies and can learn to vibrate at that healthier frequency, because the innate intelligence of the body is it wants to be healthy. So that's the concept.
Yeah. And so I love that you've incorporated those things in. And for all of you guys out there too, we'll drop a link to the True Energy site in the podcast here below. Yeah. Sorry, I lost my words for a second. Because it is important. Anything you can do to tune your frequency to the outside world. That's why being outside is so important. Lower frequencies when you're indoors and you're surrounded by electrical wiring and all of that stuff that messes with your frequency. So being outside, but the True Energy thing is something you can have on you always to increase that frequency and increase those things. Right. So using something like that and then.
Yeah, I started using it when we got down here at 40 and always had used, stuff that we, bought at the grocery store and whatever, right? Like that's just, you just buy the most whatever expensive. And then you told me, well, just try this and see. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to try it for a year. And I can't believe the amount of compliments that I still get when people find out I'm 45 and they're like, no, you're not. I actually, what do we have? A doctor that.
Yeah, this is why I had to start using it. Somebody thought she was in somebody's class and they were like, I think I know your dad. He works here, right? And I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah, no. I was like, ooh, this stuff's working really good. So you've added things. I absolutely love the eye repair serum is my absolute favorite thing. I think I smile more than I frown, but the smile lines, definitely I would like to keep them at bay. And through you, I think I started using that about a year and a half ago. But the products there's no reaction. There's nothing. I know that coming from you as the, queen of I'm not putting crap in my products. It's just, everything. We get a sunburn. We use I told you this before. I think that's most people, like when they're asking about the body cream, I'm like, if you get a sunburn, put this on. Works better than aloe, works better than any of our natural remedies that we all try. instantly takes that sting away and helps bring down the redness. So whatever's in your magical little products has done worlds of difference for, especially after going through chiropractic school and the amount of wrinkles and gray hair I got from that. It's amazing how, just using the lymphatic stone, all of the different tools that you've created, how much that really helps your body and helps, the appearance that you're going after and that we want, but in a natural way, that I'm not filling my body with a bunch of chemicals that are now having an adverse effect that I'm more suffering.
Right.
So
Right.
love it, love it, love it, love it. Can't talk more about it.
Cool. Well, Dr. Cathy, thank you for being on as we kind of wrap up. So the true energy stuff is one way to keep your vibe high, right? The other
Mhm.
thing is work on your emotions. I know they're messy and I try to stay away from them. But if your face is telling subtitles, then you probably need to get some stuff out there and you need to kind of get over it. So that's another way to really work on it. And then just keep moving, right? So thank you guys again for being part of episode 14, and we will see you next time.